Tae-hyun had been working on the water purification system when the alarm started screaming. He was deep inside the mechanical chambers of the Kepler 442b colony, covered in dust and sweat, when the red emergency lights began to flash through the metal corridors. His first thought was not fear, but confusion. The colony was safe. There had been no attacks, no disasters. Nothing ever happened on Kepler 442b. It was a quiet place where people came to work and live in peace. He climbed out of the purification tank and wiped his hands on his work pants. The alarm was getting louder. Tae-hyun moved toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the empty chamber. As a maintenance engineer, he had heard many different alarms in his 3 years at the colony. This one was different. This alarm meant danger. This alarm meant something was very wrong. When he reached the main corridor, he found chaos. People were running everywhere. Some were heading toward the shelters. Others were trying to find their families. Tae-hyun grabbed a passing worker and asked what was happening. The man was breathing hard and his eyes were full of fear. He told Tae-hyun that ships had landed outside the colony. Not human ships. Alien ships. Ships from the Keshtar Council. Tae-hyun had heard stories about the Keshtar Council. They were powerful. They controlled many star systems, but he had always been told they were peaceful traders. They did business. They did not attack. He asked the worker if they had sent a message. The man shook his head and kept running. Tae-hyun made a choice that would change his life forever. Instead of running to the shelters with everyone else, he went to the main communication station. He was a maintenance engineer, not a soldier, but he knew the communication systems. He had fixed them many times. If anyone was going to speak with these visitors, they would need the communication station to work properly. The station was empty when he arrived. Everyone had abandoned it during the panic. Tae-hyun sat down at the main console and checked the systems. Everything was working. He sent out a message on all frequencies. He said the colony meant no harm. He said they wanted to talk. He said they were peaceful people just trying to survive on this planet. No one answered his message. Instead, the doors to the communication station burst open. Soldiers in black armor entered. They were tall, and their armor was made of materials Tae-hyun had never seen before. They moved with purpose and precision. They did not speak. They simply grabbed Tae-hyun and lifted him off the ground. He tried to resist, but he was just a maintenance engineer. He was not trained to fight. He was nothing compared to these soldiers. They carried him through the corridors of his own colony as if it belonged to them. They brought him to one of their ships. The ship was enormous and cold, and everything about it felt wrong. Tae-hyun was thrown into a small cell. The door locked behind him. He heard voices outside the cell speaking in a language he did not understand. They were discussing something about him. One voice seemed excited. Another seemed annoyed. Then a new voice spoke. It was crisp and clear, and it was speaking in perfect English. The voice belonged to a tall woman with white hair and cold eyes. Her name was Administrator Kyo-sung. She stood outside his cell and looked at him like he was an insect she had found on her floor. She told him that the Keshtar Council had been negotiating with humanity for many years. She said humans were stubborn and rude, and they did not respect proper authority. She said the council had grown tired of trying to be peaceful with people who did not understand power. Tae-hyun asked what they wanted with him. He was just one person. He was not a leader. He was just a maintenance engineer. He fixed things. He was nobody important. Kyo-sung smiled, but it was not a kind smile. She said that was exactly the point. She said they did not want a leader. They wanted a regular person, someone ordinary. She said the council was going to teach humanity a lesson about what happened when you disrespected the Keshtar. She said the lesson would be clear and it would be permanent. Tae-hyun did not understand what she meant. He asked her to explain. But Kyo-sung had already turned away. She was speaking to someone else now, giving orders in her own language. Tae-hyun heard only one phrase repeated several times. The phrase was, "Containment Chamber 7." The soldiers came back and took him deeper into the ship. They passed through many corridors. They walked for a long time. Finally, they reached a massive door. Beyond the door, Tae-hyun could see darkness. The soldiers pushed him inside and the door closed behind him with a sound like thunder. For several minutes, Tae-hyun stood in the darkness trying to understand what had happened. One moment he had been fixing a water purification system. The next moment he had been taken from his home by alien soldiers and brought to a strange ship. Now he was standing alone in complete darkness in a place called Containment Chamber 7. He reached out his hands to feel the walls around him. The walls were smooth and very cold. The chamber was enormous, much larger than any normal prison cell. He could walk for several minutes in any direction and not reach the far walls. The floor beneath his feet was also smooth and cold. There was no light at all. There was no sound except his own breathing. Tae-hyun sat down on the floor and tried to think. He was smart. He could solve problems. He had fixed machines that were broken. Maybe he could fix this situation too. Maybe he could find a way out. But as he sat in the darkness, he heard something that made his blood turn cold. It was breathing, not human breathing. Breathing that was heavy and deep and came from somewhere in the darkness. Breathing that belonged to something large, something very large, something that was not alone in the chamber with him. Tae-hyun's heart began to beat very fast. He realized with sudden clarity what Administrator Kyo-sung had meant. This was not a prison. This was a death sentence. And he was not alone. He would never be alone again. There was something in the darkness with him. Something that was hungry. Something that was waiting for him to move so it could hunt. The breathing grew closer. Tae-hyun forced himself to stay very still. His mind was racing, but his body understood something important. Prey animals that moved first usually died first. He had read that somewhere. He had never thought it would be useful information. He had never thought he would be prey. The breathing in the darkness continued. It was getting closer now. Tae-hyun could feel the heat coming from the creature. Whatever it was large and it was warm and it was definitely alive. He closed his eyes even though there was no difference between keeping them open and closed. Everything around him was pure darkness. Then something emerged from the black. At first it was just two lights in the darkness. The lights were bright and they were glowing. They took a moment for Tae-hyun to understand. They were eyes. Two enormous eyes that belonged to something he could not yet see. The eyes were fixed on him, and they were studying him with hungry intelligence. As his vision adjusted to the faint glow from the creature's eyes, Tae-hyun began to see the shape of the thing. It was massive. It was easily 3 meters tall, maybe more. The body was covered in thick skin that looked like armor. He could see muscles moving beneath the skin, muscles that rippled with power. The creature had 4 legs and a long tail that moved slowly back and forth across the chamber floor. On its front limbs, Tae-hyun could see claws. They were long and curved, and they looked like they could cut through anything. This was a Vrex. Tae-hyun had never seen one before, but he had read about them. The colony archives had information about dangerous species. The Vrex was listed as the most dangerous. It was listed as an apex predator. It was listed as something that humans should avoid at all costs, and now one was looking at him with eyes that burned like twin moons. The creature took a step forward, then another. Its movements were slow and deliberate. It was not rushing. It seemed like it was in no hurry at all. It had all the time in the world, because it knew that Tae-hyun could not escape. The chamber had no doors that he could reach. The walls were smooth and impossible to climb. There was nowhere to run. Tae-hyun's body wanted to panic. His heart wanted to race, and his lungs wanted to scream, and his legs wanted to run. But his mind was different. His mind was still working. His mind was analyzing everything it could see. The creature moved with a slight limp. Its right back leg did not move quite the same way as the others. It favored its left side. It was injured. Not badly, but enough that Tae-hyun noticed. And there was something else. As the creature moved closer, Tae-hyun saw a patch of skin on its left side that looked different. It looked like old wound tissue. It looked infected. The edges were darker than the surrounding skin and they looked swollen. The creature was not just injured. It was sick. The Vrex was close now, so close that Tae-hyun could smell it. It smelled like blood and earth and something wild. The creature lowered its head toward him. Tae-hyun could see the teeth. They were long and sharp, and they could easily tear through human bones. The creature opened its mouth slightly. It was showing him the teeth. It was showing him what it could do. Tae-hyun made a decision. He did not know if it was the right decision. He did not have time to think it through carefully. He simply made a choice and acted on it. He did not run. He did not scream. He did not try to fight back. Instead, he started to talk. His voice was calm and steady. He was not sure how he kept his voice from shaking, but he did. He spoke in a low tone. He spoke the way his mother used to speak when she was trying to calm a frightened animal. He spoke words that the creature would not understand, but whose sound might mean something. He spoke about his childhood. He spoke about working on the colony. He spoke about fixing things and solving problems. He spoke about the beauty of the stars and the peaceful nights on Kepler 442b. The creature stopped moving. It was still close to him, but it was no longer moving toward him. Its head was tilted slightly to one side. Its eyes were still fixed on him, but something in them had changed. The pure hunger was still there, but something else was mixed in with it now. Something that might have been curiosity. Tae-hyun kept talking. He kept his voice calm and gentle. He moved very slowly toward the creature's left side, the side with the infected wound. As he moved, he kept talking about nothing important. He talked about the water purification system. He talked about the complicated mechanisms and the beautiful engineering. He talked about how satisfying it was to fix something broken. The creature did not stop him. When Tae-hyun was close enough, he reached out his hand very slowly. He extended his arm toward the wounded area. The creature could have killed him with one movement. It could have torn his arm off. Instead, it held still. It allowed Tae-hyun to touch the skin around the infection. The wound was hot, very hot. The infection was bad. It was worse than Tae-hyun had realized. This creature was not just hunting for food because it was hungry. It was hunting because it was desperate. Pain was driving it to hunt. Pain was making it dangerous. Tae-hyun kept his hand on the creature's side. He kept talking. And something extraordinary happened. The creature, this apex predator that had killed 17 people, seemed to relax slightly. It seemed to understand that Tae-hyun was not trying to hurt it. It seemed to understand something else too. It seemed to understand that Tae-hyun was trying to help. The two of them stood together in the darkness of the chamber. The human with his small hand on the creature's massive side. The predator with its head down and its breathing slowly becoming less aggressive. Neither of them knew what would happen next. Neither of them knew if they would survive the night. But in that moment, something shifted between them. Something that had nothing to do with dominance or power or hunger. In that moment, two creatures from completely different worlds had found something in common. They had both been hurt. They had both been scared. And they had both been willing to take a chance on kindness instead of violence. Tae-hyun did not sleep that first night. He was too afraid and too focused on staying alive. But as the hours passed and the Vrex did not attack him, some of his fear began to change into something else. It became observation. It became curiosity. It became the problem-solving instinct that had always been at the core of who he was. The creature, which Tae-hyun had learned from the distant voices was called Keth, seemed to be suffering. Every few minutes it would shift its weight from one leg to the other. It would sometimes press its left side against the cold chamber floor, as if the coolness helped with the pain. The infection was clearly getting worse. Tae-hyun could see it more clearly now that his eyes had adjusted to the dim light from the creature's eyes. As the night went on, Keth began to trust Tae-hyun more. The creature moved around the chamber and Tae-hyun followed. Keth showed him different areas of the space. There were markings on the walls where previous occupants had tried to scratch their way out. There were stains on the floor that told stories Tae-hyun did not want to think about. In one corner, there were the bones of creatures that Keth had eaten. In another corner was a water source, a small pool that seemed to be fed by a hidden mechanism in the wall. Tae-hyun realized that this chamber was not just a prison. It was a complete environment. It was a space designed to keep creatures alive for as long as possible before they killed each other. The Keshatar wanted to watch. They wanted to see the violence. They wanted to broadcast the death to all the worlds that might consider defying them. But something had gone wrong with their plan. Instead of violence, there was this strange bond forming between a human and a predator. Tae-hyun explored the chamber carefully. His engineering mind was already analyzing everything. The walls were made of a material he did not recognize. It was harder than steel, but it was also slightly warm to the touch. There were panels set into the walls at regular intervals. Some had small lights behind them. Those were the observation cameras. The Keshtar were watching. They were always watching. There was also a storage compartment near the water source. Tae-hyun found it by accident when he was examining the walls. Inside the compartment were tools. Not weapons, but maintenance tools. Basic things like cutting implements and flexible tubes and materials that could be used for repairs. It was strange that they would leave tools in a death chamber, unless they expected the occupants to need them for something. Tae-hyun gathered the tools and began to think about the infection on Keth's side. The creature was suffering, but more importantly, the infection was making the creature angry and unpredictable. If the infection got worse, Keth might stop being calm and might start being dangerous again. Tae-hyun needed to do something about it. He approached Keth slowly, and the creature responded by lowering its massive head. There was trust there now. Not complete trust, but enough. Tae-hyun examined the wound more closely. It was very bad. The skin was swollen and the infection had begun to spread. If this continued, the creature might die, and if Keth died, Tae-hyun would be alone in the chamber with a corpse. Tae-hyun returned to the materials he had gathered. He found some composite pieces that had been used for maintenance of the chamber itself. The composites had certain properties. He knew this from his work on the colony. They had antimicrobial qualities. They were used in medical applications sometimes. It was not ideal, but it was something. He broke the composites down into smaller pieces and mixed them with water from the pool. He also found some cloth in the storage area and tore it into strips. It was not a proper medical treatment, but it was better than nothing. He approached Keth again, and this time the creature seemed to understand what was happening. It moved its body to give Tae-hyun better access to the wound. The work took hours. Tae-hyun cleaned away the infection carefully. The creature did not move or resist, even though it must have been painful. Tae-hyun applied the makeshift poultice slowly and carefully. He wrapped the cloth strips around the creature's side to keep the treatment in place. As he worked, he talked constantly. He explained everything he was doing. He told Keth about his training and his experience. He told the creature about other injuries he had treated and how those creatures had healed. By the time he was finished, the infection had been cleaned and dressed as well as Tae-hyun could manage. The wound looked better. Not perfect, but better. Keth seemed to feel better too. The creature's movements became less tense. The angry edge to its breathing disappeared. The creature did something unexpected then. It made a sound. It was a low rumbling noise that came from deep in its chest. Tae-hyun was not sure what the sound meant. It could have been pain, but it did not sound like pain. It sounded like relief. It sounded like gratitude. Taehyun sat down on the chamber floor and Keth settled down beside him. The creature's body was warm and solid and surprisingly gentle given its size. The tail curled around protectively. The creature's head rested on the floor near Taehyun, but not in a threatening way. It was more like the creature was keeping watch. Taehyun realized that this was what they wanted from each other. The Vrex wanted someone to care about its pain and try to help instead of trying to kill it. The human wanted to feel like he had some control over his situation and some purpose beyond just waiting to die. They had both found what they needed in the most unexpected place. As the hours of the night passed, Keth's breathing became slower and more regular. The creature seemed to be falling asleep. Taehyun remained awake, watching over his unusual companion. He did not know what would happen when the Keshatar discovered what had transpired in the chamber. He did not know if the observation feeds would show them something they wanted to see or something that would make them angry. But he did know one thing. He was no longer alone in the darkness. And the creature that was supposed to kill him was instead lying beside him, its massive body radiating warmth and something that might have been affection. In the cold depths of the Keshatar ship, two broken creatures had found each other. And in that finding, something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in the universe. Something that no one in the council chambers had anticipated or understood. The morning light came to Containment Chamber 7 in the form of automated brightness levels being adjusted from the walls. The Keshatar wanted observers to be able to see everything clearly. They wanted the violence and the death to be visible and vivid. They were not expecting what the brightness revealed. In the observation deck high above the chamber, Administrator Kyo-sung sat in the central command station with coffee in her hand and satisfaction in her expression. She had been waiting for this moment. She had set a timer for the feeds to switch on at exactly the moment when the chaos should have finished. She expected to see bones and blood and the remains of what had once been a human engineer. She expected to see Keth covered in fresh kills and hungry for more. She expected something that would make excellent propaganda for the other star systems. What she saw made her drop her coffee. The camera feed showed something impossible. Taehyun was still alive. Not only was he alive, but he was sleeping peacefully with his back against Keth's side. His hand was resting on the creature's chest. The creature was awake and alert, but it was not attacking. Instead, Keth was watching over the sleeping human with an expression that could only be described as protective. The observation room fell silent. Kyo-sung stood up from her chair. Her staff members looked at her with confusion and then looked back at the monitors. No one said anything. No one knew what to say. Haewon was one of the young analysts working the observation station that morning. She had been with the Keshatar for 5 years. She had seen many things that most people never saw, but nothing like this. She felt something move in her chest when she looked at the screen. It was not fear. It was not what she had expected to feel. It was something else. It was wonder. "Run the footage again," Kyo-sung commanded. Her voice was quiet. From the moment the human was placed in the chamber to now, the technicians scrambled to comply. The footage scrolled backward and then played forward in accelerated time. Everyone watched as Taehyun remained still while Keth circled him. Everyone watched as the human began to speak to the predator. Everyone watched as the human moved slowly toward the creature's injured side. Everyone watched as hands and claws did not become weapons, but instead became tools of something else, something that had no name in the Keshatar language. When the footage finished, the room was even more silent than before. "This is a malfunction," Kyo-sung said, but her voice did not sound certain. "Something is wrong with the chamber. The creature should have attacked. The human should be dead." Haewon made a decision that she would spend the rest of her life both regretting and celebrating. She spoke up. "I do not believe there is a malfunction. Administrator." I believe we are observing something that we have never observed before. I believe we are observing humanity. Everyone looked at Hei Wan. She was young and she should not have spoken without being asked. But she continued anyway. The human did not fight. The human did not try to dominate. The human simply understood that the creature was suffering and tried to help. This is not weakness. This is something else. Kyo-sung turned to look at the analyst. Her expression was hard and cold. What is it then? Hei Wan looked at the screen where Tae-hyun slept against the Vrex. She thought about everything she had been taught about strength and power. She thought about everything she had been taught about what it meant to lead the Keshtar Council. And she realized that maybe everything she had been taught was incomplete. I think it is strength, Hei Wan said quietly. A different kind of strength than we have learned to value, but strength nonetheless. In the chamber below, Tae-hyun began to wake. His eyes opened slowly, and the first thing he saw was Keth's enormous face looking down at him. The creature's eyes were bright in the artificial morning light. The creature made that rumbling sound again, the one that seemed to express contentment. Tae-hyun sat up and examined the bandage he had placed on Keth's side. The makeshift poultice had held. The infection still looked bad, but it was no longer spreading. The swelling had begun to decrease. The creature was healing. More importantly, the creature was calm. The pain that had driven it to hunt so desperately seemed to be lessening. Keth stood up and moved to the water pool. The creature drank deeply and then looked at Tae-hyun. There was something almost expectant in that look. Tae-hyun had been awake with the creature for many hours, and he was beginning to understand how Keth communicated. The creature wanted him to follow. Tae-hyun went with Keth to another section of the chamber. In a corner that he had not fully explored, there were carcasses of small creatures. They looked like they had been hunted recently, but not eaten. Keth had left them there. As Tae-hyun watched, the creature pushed the carcasses toward him with its snout. Tae-hyun understood. Keth was hunting for him. Keth was ensuring that the human had food. This was not just protection. This was care. This was the kind of care that an adult gives to a young one. This was the kind of behavior that predators showed to their own offspring. Tae-hyun felt tears on his face, but he did not know why he was crying. He was alive. He was receiving care from a creature that had been designed and trained to kill without mercy. He was experiencing something that the Keshtar Council had not believed was possible. He was experiencing love. In the observation deck, Hei Wan continued to watch. She was taking notes, and she was documenting everything that she saw. She knew that what she was witnessing would change the way the Keshatar understood the universe. She knew that this single human, through nothing but kindness and patience, had revealed something about consciousness and connection that had been hidden from her people for thousands of years. Kyo-sung ordered the observation feeds to continue recording, but she gave no order to stop the experiment. She did not order the chamber flooded with poison gas. She did not order the walls to be electrified. She did not take any of the usual steps that would bring a swift end to what was supposed to be a simple demonstration of human weakness. Instead, she went to her private office and she sat in silence for a very long time. She thought about power and what it really meant. She thought about the demonstration she had planned and what it was actually demonstrating. She thought about a maintenance engineer from a small human colony who had done what no weapon or technology or military force had ever managed to do. He had transformed an apex predator into something gentle, and in doing so, he had transformed something in the administrator as well. Though she would never admit it to anyone, in that moment, Kyo-sung began to understand that the Keshatar Council might have been very wrong about what human beings really were. Days passed in the chamber. Tae-hyun lost track of exactly how many days it had been. Time felt different in the containment space. It stretched and contracted in ways that his mind could not quite measure. But he knew that his bond with Keth was growing stronger with each passing moment. The infection on Keth's side was healing well. Tae-hyun had changed the poultice twice more. He had used the composite materials carefully and efficiently, the way an engineer uses scarce resources. The swelling had gone down significantly. The creature was moving better, limping less with each day. The pain that had made Keth desperate and dangerous was fading. But there was something else that was growing. It was a form of communication between them. Tae-hyun had started to understand the different sounds that Keth made. A low rumbling sound meant contentment. A sharp click meant alert attention. A high whistle sound meant hunger. Through these sounds, Keth and Tae-hyun had developed a language of their own. It had no words, but it had meaning. Tae-hyun also began to notice things about Keth that he had not seen at first. The creature was intelligent. Incredibly intelligent. Keth understood cause and effect. The creature understood that the poultice helped the wound heal. Keth understood that Tae-hyun was responsible for the food that appeared in the chamber. The creature was not just a mindless predator. Keth was a conscious being with thoughts and feelings and preferences. On what Tae-hyun believed was the sixth day, he decided to try something new. He had been sitting with Keth and thinking about home. He thought about his mother and the songs she used to sing to him when he was a child. He thought about how those songs had always made him feel safe and cared for. He thought about how maybe Keth needed to feel safe and cared for too. So he began to sing. The song was an old lullaby from his childhood. It was in Korean, a language that no creature from this world could possibly understand. But the meaning of a song is not always in the words. The meaning is in the feeling that comes from the voice. The meaning is in the intention behind the melody. Tae-hyun sang softly, and the sound filled the chamber. Keth lifted his head and listened. The creature did not move away. The creature simply listened as Tae-hyun poured all of his hope and all of his loneliness and all of his love for his unusual companion into the melody. The song was about a mother and a child. It was about protection and safety and unconditional care. The song was about knowing that no matter what happened in the world outside, there was always someone who would be there to keep you warm and safe. Tae-hyun sang about how the night was dark, but that the darkness was temporary. Tae-hyun sang about how morning always came eventually. When the song ended, Keth made a new sound. It was a sound that Tae-hyun had never heard before. It was deep and gentle, and it seemed to come from a place deep within the creature's chest. It was a sound of emotion that had no translation. It was a sound of pure feeling. Keth moved closer to Tae-hyun and lowered his massive head. The creature pressed its snout against Tae-hyun's chest, right over his heart. The two of them remained like that for a long time, connected in a way that transcended species and evolution, and all the reasons why they should have been enemies. Tae-hyun placed his hand on Keth's head. He could feel the bone beneath the scaled skin. He could feel the texture of the creature's body. He could feel the warmth of Keth's blood moving beneath the surface. He could feel everything that made this creature alive and real and present in the world. In the observation deck far above, Hae-won had been watching the feeds continuously. She had not slept much in the past 6 days. She had spent her time documenting everything and taking notes. She had also been doing something else. She had been convincing the other staff members that what they were witnessing was important. She had been preparing them for what she knew would have to happen eventually. The footage of Tae-hyun singing had been broadcast to every member of the observation team. No one said anything about it. No one commented. But everyone had seen it. Everyone had witnessed the moment when a human sang to an apex predator, and the predator responded with something that could only be called affection. Hae-won had also sent the footage to other Keshatar councils on other stations. She had written a report that detailed everything that had happened. She had explained how a human engineer had transformed a dangerous creature through nothing but kindness and understanding. She had made her argument very carefully. She had written that this was not a failure of the experiment. This was the most important success the Keshatar had ever achieved. She had written that they had discovered something about consciousness that would change how they understood the universe. She had written that if they killed Tae-hyun and Keth, they would be destroying the most important discovery in Keshatar history. She had sent the report through official channels with official seals. She had made it impossible for Kyo-sung to ignore the implications of what was happening in the chamber below. And then she waited. In the chamber, Tae-hyun continued to care for Keth. He maintained the poultice on the creature's wound even as it became less necessary. He brought water to Keth and shared the hunted animals that the creature provided. He talked to the creature about everything and nothing. He told Keth about his family and his dreams and his fears. Tae-hyun also told Keth about the Keshatar and about why he had been taken. He told the creature that they were in a prison and that they were supposed to die. But as he said these things, he no longer believed them. He could not believe them when he was looking into Keth's eyes and seeing the intelligence and gentleness that looked back at him. One day, as Tae-hyun was resting against Keth's warm side, something changed. The chamber itself changed. The walls began to emit a different pattern of light. A door that Tae-hyun had not been able to see began to glow. It was an actual door, a physical exit from the chamber. Tae-hyun's heart began to race. This was it. This was the moment when everything would be decided. This was when the Keshatar would come for them. This was when they would discover that the experiment had not gone as planned. This was when they would decide what to do with a human and a Vrex that had become something more than prisoners and predator. Keth sensed the change in Tae-hyun's emotion. The creature stood up and moved to the door. Keth's body became alert and ready. The apex predator was back in control of the creature's movements. Keth was prepared to fight and to kill if necessary to protect Tae-hyun. The door began to open. Light flooded in from outside the chamber. Tae-hyun could not see what lay beyond, but he could hear voices. He could hear the sound of weapons being readied. He could hear the sound of creatures moving. This was the moment of truth. This was when the Keshatar would finally respond to what had happened in the darkness. Tae-hyun stepped forward to face whatever was coming next. But he did not step forward alone. Keth moved beside him, a massive guardian that would face anything that threatened its small companion.